Hello, everyone. The day has come to talk about Cyberpunk 2077,
Yeah.
the near final version of the game as things are being wrapped up and we're playing the real full game here. I have not gotten that much time into it. It says 8 hours. I feel like I played it for half an hour or an hour. Like the time.
Sure.
There's so much there. But Ben, like your whole last week has just been Cyberpunk pretty much. We pushed you
Yeah.
away from everything else as much as we can.
Yeah, I believe I'm about 30 hours in at
Oh,
the
wow.
moment. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I've definitely put in a significant chunk of time, and boy, do I have a lot to say about this game. Like, it's one of those games, and I don't know if you've gotten this sense in your time with it, where it's like I'm not even really sure where to begin. Like, there's so much to talk about that
That's
it
how I
is
feel
kind of
playing the
overwhelming.
game.
Yeah,
Ben. 'Cause,
yeah.
like I think I'm still in some kind of pseudo prologue because there's like a prologue and then they kind of put you into like the more open world. And I'm seeing some stuff that I saw in earlier previews. But like the Watson district is in lockdown right now.
Yep. That is, yes. That is very early, for sure. There's the prologue, and then they separate it by acts.
Right.
So you will very clearly know, like, okay, I'm in the next chunk, and the lockdown will be lifted for Watson and all that sort of thing. But you were mentioning feeling kind of overwhelmed with this game and like how it functioned, and I definitely remember feeling that way in my preview. And I think by having that 4-hour period with the preview, when I got to the full game, things clicked into place for me pretty easily. I would say, like, all of the systems and stuff, it was like, okay, just having that initial experience made things
Yeah.
smoother the second time around.
And plus, I mean, I spent a solid 45 minutes with the character creator.
Yeah, boy, there's a lot of detail that you can go into. I definitely didn't spend 45 minutes, but had a lot of fun just tweaking every little
Yeah.
thing. You have a lot of options. How long did you spend customizing your genitalia? That's really that's the
Not
real
that long.
okay.
I just went with the boxer shorts and like, all right, I'm not even gonna deal with this.
But I have a lot to say about this game. I think I kind of want to start from the top down.
Yeah.
And I've really had some time to sit on this. And so, like, I want to make sure, like, okay, it's not just like a honeymoon phase. Like, I really feel this. And I feel like I've seen a lot of the game now. And it just straight up has some of the best world building I have ever seen in a game, ever. Like, kind of in every category, both how the environment is used, the performances of the characters, the way dialogue is handled, the way that what you say in dialogue, how that kind of
Yeah.
naturally like slides into the conversation. It is, I think, like the crowning achievement of this game is how far they go out of their way to make Night City believable. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, one of the things that's really stood out to me is just the amount of people not being entirely focused on you during a conversation.
Yeah.
You know, like you'll sit down pretty early on with Jackie and he's just eating his noodles the whole time, you
Yep.
know, and you meet Evelyn, I think.
Yeah, Evelyn Parker. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you meet Evelyn and she's pacing around the room and she'll go and sit down for a bit and then she'll get up and do something else. And just like that kind of sort of natural way of being in that space rather than this sort of Bethesda and Outer World style of
Yeah.
lock your face to the camera.
Right.
And that's one of the things too is that you can look around, like you don't have to be staring at them either. You can be watching the room while they're talking to you. The camera's still free to you there.
Yeah, and I think actually comparing it to Bethesda RPGs really illustrates a lot of what this game does right and how much of an advancement it is over that style. And you mentioned the animations, and like there are moments, and it's not all the time. Definitely when you get out on the street, you'll see character models with less detail than a lot of the principal characters that you're interacting with in the main quests and the side quests. But there are scenes where just the level of detail on a single person is absolutely insane. I mean, like where the tattoos are on their body, the way that their hair is just like gently bobbing around, the way that they're emoting during very long conversations. There is just so much emotion conveyed, and I think something that is really helping that is I can see why this game took so long to make, Blood, because and it's not something that I think I really think about too much when I'm playing a video game. I think I just sort of accept it because I'm used to it. But Cyberpunk has really made a case for decoration. And what I mean by that is any particular, like if you go into somebody's room, like I honestly feel like you could pretty much stand almost anywhere in this game and look around, and it's amazing like how singular the detail is. Like when you go into somebody's room, it's not just like, oh, this is like the other apartment room that I've seen. It's like, no, there are different things. Right. Like the way that things are placed or disheveled or disorganized, like there's just so much stuff everywhere. And it's like this room really feels like it belongs to this person. And just the number of styles that they kind of communicate here. I mean, when you go into different districts of the city, it's not like, and the map is huge, right? It's not like it just feels copy and pasted. It's like, no, the sights and sounds that you see here, you're not going to see exactly anywhere else in the game. And that's not strictly true in the sense that like you will see advertisements repeat again and again, but that almost feels like commentary on kind of how like present corporations are. But like, I think to give one example, something that's early on, there's this bar called Afterlife. And like, you could write a paper just on the, like how this place is laid out by itself, where you go in and like, you're just kind of awash in this blue and green light, and it gives it like a very specific atmosphere. And like the way that the music is thumping and people are kind of gathered around the bar, and you've got like these tubes of liquid, and there are like dancers in the liquid, and it's just fun to look around in this game. Like, I don't even think you necessarily need to be talking to somebody or engaged in combat or looking for loot. Like, there is so much detail that just being there is entertaining.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was doing a little side quest. There's, I guess it's a cop that basically, like, calls you up with different targets.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
And she was telling me, okay, there's this other cop. She's kind of new, and she's basically too much of a goody two shoes, and she's about to unravel this whole corruption ring that ties into the police force. And so you're basically told to like go and dissuade her from, get her off the case. Whatever you have to do, just get her off the case. But what's interesting about that is, and part of that where she's at is that just like basically like a street market with different vendors and grills and food and all that kind of thing. And and again, just so much life right there. And then even when you go into the apartment complex, you kind of like hack your way into this lower apartment. And like you're saying, like this is clearly somebody in this motel has been here.
Right.
And you can, check out that area on your way to finding this cop.
Yeah.
The other thing I kind of noticed when we're talking about the dialogue choices and things is not in every case, but in a lot more than I think you typically see in these kinds of games, people are pretty impatient.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
People will push you to make a decision like, hey, don't wait on this. Or there'll be a lot of moments where you have like the bar rolling down. So you only have so long to make a decision.
Yep.
And I actually have found that, like, I've been in situations like when you're dealing with Maelstrom and you're trying to get the bot for Dexter Deshawn, the guy that's pushing your buttons, like, you get this dialogue choice and there's not a right answer here.
Right.
And so just like, I'm just going to shut up. And that ended up being the thing to get me through that conversation, is to not give him a response.
Right. So focusing in on the dialogue, I think there's so much to talk about here. Again, it's kind of overwhelming. But what you're saying with the decisions and how natural they are, I actually think that's a really interesting choice that they made, because you do have moments where it's like, oh, okay, I can only select this option because of the background that I chose, right? So I chose the
Yeah.
Nomad background. And it's like, I have this option because I chose that background. Or like you have enough points in a certain ability where it's like, okay, I know enough about, you
Yeah.
know, hacking that I can choose this option.
Yeah, I was
But
able to talk to Judy, the brain dance girl,
right.
about her tech because I had tech points high enough. Yeah.
Right. And so those moments pop up, but it feels a lot less regimented than it does in other games that have those options, and you never really know what how they're going to pop up, or it doesn't make it like super clear like, okay, this is what changed, or this is the information that you got locked out of. There's kind of a flow to conversation, and I guess the best way I can try to articulate the point is that it doesn't feel like the characters or the world are revolving around your character sheet. Like the game just tries to
Right.
throw them in unexpectedly when they make sense, and it doesn't make it immediately clear like, oh, okay, this is how it changed. Like it's not that like, Paragon Renegade good evil sort of thing. Like the moments that you're talking about with Dexter Deshawn, things are kind of happening so fast that you're acting on instinct. You're not really like
Right.
sitting there pondering the dialogue box. It's like, no, like these people have you at gunpoint. You have to make a decision. And like sometimes things happen so fast, you're like, could that have gone differently? I'm not sure. And so there's just a tremendous effort again to the commitment of the situations themselves, and not really going out of its way to be like, okay, you invested in this skill tree, so we're going to make you feel super special. It's like, no, it's not about making you the player feel special. It's about you being V in this world. And kind of just branching off of that point, Blood, V is absolutely a character, like a tremendous character.
Hmm.
And I think the concern when you have somebody that you can fully customize, you can choose the gender of, you can choose the background of, that they just
And
kind
then
of,
you're playing in first person.
and then
Yeah.
and then you're mostly playing in first person. That they just kind of become this vessel for the world, and that is absolutely not the case in Cyberpunk. Like V is an active participant in what is going on, and really becomes somebody that you get attached to, not just because of who I picked female V, but not just because of who she's interacting with, but because of her own stakes in the situation. And she's one of the best characters in the game, and really goes through so much.
Yeah, I think the other thing too, I kind of wanted to just tack on with the dialogue trees is I think one of the reasons that they feel the way that they do um, is it doesn't feel like I'm going through like a choose your own adventure book and I'm going
Exactly.
to read every option.
Exactly.
Like it just feels like, okay, I've got enough for where this conversation is going, and it's time to move on. I don't feel like I have to see every permutation and every option and every bit of lore that could come out of this. It just feels like I'm having a conversation and I'm pushing in that direction the conversation is going.
Yeah, and I think something, especially with CRPGs, that can kind of be a sin of the genre, is like you'll get a side quest for a character, and like sometimes you start these really long RPGs and you're like, okay, I'm going to learn everything about every character, but then you kind of get exhausted of doing that, and you tend to like maybe not focus on that as much, because the way that characters sort of present themselves, it's like, okay, well, I can choose the option to get like this really long backstory for this character, and like they can explain the whole situation, and then I'm probably never going to see them again throughout the whole game. And that's not what Cyberpunk does. You mentioned Evelyn Parker, and she's a really good example of what I'm talking about, because when you interact with her initially, you don't really know anything about her. She is this client who is hiring you, and she kind of keeps you at arm's length, right? It's not like you choose an option of dialogue and it's like, well, okay, I'll reveal everything to you. It's like, no, like based on this situation, the way that she's acting is supernatural. Not, supernatural is ridiculous, but
Right.
but very believable and convincing. And these characters what is so good about them is, again, it's not like you do this one thing for them and then they go away forever. So many of the characters kind of become like, it's like a snowball effect, and they kind of become a part of your journey. And it's not just like somebody there to give you this cool little memorable side quest and you write about it. It's like, no, they like, you'll get entangled with them and their problems will become your problems, and your problems will become their problems, and they'll keep repeatedly getting contact with you. And it feels like you're building actual relationships rather than just checking a bunch of stuff off a list. And of course, there are like degrees of that. Like there are plenty of tasks that are very like, yeah, do you want to go stop this crime and go do it? And those don't have the relationships that I'm talking about. But for
Right.
so many of the side quests and of course the main quest, that is definitely there.
Yeah, what I think is interesting too is when you're talking about there's those discoverable quests that you go around and do.
Yeah.
And yeah, some of them I think are kind of, I don't know, maybe repeatable in a way in terms of just like the blue icons,
Yes. Yep.
but then there are also, the, kind of question mark quests, which is funny because in The Witcher, like question mark things were generally pretty much like almost like filler, right? It's like
Yeah.
kill the monster nest or something. But so far to me, when I've gone to the question mark thing, it's like, no, this is a person and there is a backstory here, and this stuff actually feels like there's more to it than just take out these guys.
Yeah. And the blue markers on the map absolutely are kind of like the sort of equivalent to like destroy the monster nests in Witcher, or something to that effect. Just like little things that you can do if you want to get a little extra money or experience or whatever. But the question marks on the map that you're talking about, there are the side quests and these sort of things that you can stumble into are so well written and involved and have so many different steps to them that it's like, wait, I have to check. Is this a main quest that I'm doing or not? Like, there really isn't that much of a separation between them. And some of them are just extremely funny. Some of them are very, very sad. But yeah, I feel like in all of them, you just get a better sense of the city and the people that inhabit it. And I want to go back to the dialogue, Blake, because something that I was worried about is how characters talk to each other. This game is extremely heavy on slang.
Right.
And depending on who you're talking to and who they're affiliated with or what their line of work is, they will throw a lot of lingo at you. And there are definitely moments where it's like, I don't know what that word means. But and the problem with taking that kind of approach sometimes is it can feel very, very forced, where it's like the thing about slang is it has to feel natural and it has to make sense for who these characters are. Otherwise, it's like, no, I can definitely tell like somebody was trying to write this to be cool. It can feel very artificial, but it really doesn't, because they kind of like resist a lot of bad habits. Again, it's not like you have somebody sitting down and explaining to you. It's like, okay, it's like, this is who these people are and this is how they talk. You just sort of learn through context, and the context is so strong that you kind of get an understanding of it. And then all of a sudden they're using these words and you don't even bat an eye anymore. It's like, yeah, this all feels super, super, super natural. And that comes down to the performances, man. I already shouted out V, but goddamn, Keanu Reeves does an amazing job. Like, to a level I was not expecting. He definitely has like one of the most balls to the walls characters. Definitely somebody who has to say some crazy, ridiculous lines, and he crushes it. Like, it's almost unbelievable. He is like smoldering, and he's so believably cool in a way that is like almost impossible to grasp. And I don't think he's done any other games, but you would never tell. Like, the amount of dialogue they give to him and the amount of things that he has to say, and he can turn it on a dime. Like, there are incredibly emotional scenes that really hang on him, and he does just as well there as when he's like on stage playing a guitar. I was just really impressed by that.
Very nice. Yeah, I haven't gotten to Keanu yet, so I'm definitely looking forward to that.
Yeah.
since we are starting to get up on time, I wanted to talk about. I know you wanted to talk about combat,
Yes.
and get into that because there's a lot of different layers to how you build your character, which I'm still exploring because like you have all of the points and perks and things, and then you've got your whole like your augments basically for using a Deus Ex term, like all the parts that you slap into your body.
Yeah.
And then you've got the things that you actually wear and your weapons that you equip and everything. And then hacking in the mix of it. Well,
Yeah. And I think what's so cool about Cyberpunk that it kind of gets around sort of the limitation of RPGs where, I always talk about how I like how games limit you. And it's like, well, you made this decision, so you can't do everything else. And Cyberpunk takes this interesting approach where you're sort of investing points into two different layers. And so you have these sort of broader abilities like body, which is physical strength, or reflexes, which is, ability with like pistols and blades. And then you have like intelligence, which kind of primarily deals with hacking. And so as you level up, you're investing points into those sort of broader abilities, but then you get totally separate perk points which you can put into any of the abilities. So even if you're not investing in intelligence, you can still put perks in intelligence to boost up your hacking, and you'll be limited because the amount of perks that you'll have available won't be as high as if you actually invested in it. But you can still do it if there's something appealing in that tree that you have access to. And so you're still making choices and you're still being limited, but there is a tremendous sense of flexibility. And it's not because sometimes like with RPGs, when you're making these decisions, it's like, well, 20 hours ago, I guess I put a lot into strength. So I'll keep doing that because I'm just not going to get the returns out of investing in other things. And that doesn't really happen here. As you get access to more things, you can kind of adapt on the fly, and it doesn't feel like you're just sort of buffing up a couple of things. Like you can really spread yourself out and get a lot of flexibility to your character, which is nice.
yeah. Well, and I think too, what what helps with that is just the language, as you were saying, is so different here. It's like when you have, tech and body and cool and like
Right.
what am I
Yeah.
even investing in right now? When
Right.
you first start out and they've asked you to put points into things, I'm like,
Right. So actually, that's a great point to bring up, Bud, because it is overwhelming, and I had that sense during the preview as well. What I would recommend to anybody playing this game is kind of once you get full access to your character, look at all of sort of those broader categories, and then look at the skill trees for sort of everything, like every layer, and kind of do maybe like a mental map of like, oh, that seems good or whatever. Because I think if you kind of do that initial preparation, things will get easier down the line. And kind of going into Combat Blood even more, there's so much I want to say because everything feels equally valuable in a way, and I feel like I'm kind of doing everything when I get into a combat situation. It's like, oh, I'm using hacking because I want to turn off these security cameras. I'll try to stealth for as long as I can because if I grab somebody, it's an instant kill. And then when shit hits the fan, I've invested points in these weapons and I can handle them. And so it's not like I'm doing these missions and it's like, well, I've invested in stealth, so I'm only going to stealth. You're capable enough, regardless of what you've invested in, to kind of do a little bit of everything. And you are given a lot of opportunities to do a little bit of everything, which is nice.
yeah. And for Huber's benefit, the shotguns feel good so far.
I think the guns in general feel really, really good. Blood. The feedback that you have with the weapons is pretty great. There's just this like sense of weight and kick and just kind of this fluidity that you just never get in RPGs, really. I can't think of guns that feel this good in another heavily stat driven RPG like this. What I will say though is the hand-to-hand combat is pretty disappointing.
Sure, yeah.
They definitely try. They definitely try to throw in some mechanics there of like strong attacks, breaking guard, and like you parrying and being able to counterattack. But when you're kind of in the midst of combat and there's a lot going on, it just you don't really have a great chance to put all of those mechanics into practice, and you really don't need to. Like, just kind of like, I spent a lot of money and time investing in mantis blades, which are the giant swords that can pop out of your arms, and I just fuck everything up, but I really don't need to do a whole lot. Like, I can just kind of frantically click and get through fights, and there's kind of just this awkwardness and this sloppiness in a bad way that I don't really like. It doesn't really feel that different from, Bethesda melee combat.
Well, and you don't really lock onto an enemy either, so like kind of getting that sort of one-on-one melee vibe, that standoff vibe doesn't work as well, I don't think.
Right.
But I've totally, like, even early on, just like using my fists, have noticed that, like, sometimes, like, if I just keep pummeling this guy, he's not really going to be able to react a lot of the time, and I can just take him out that way.
Right. Yeah, and like with the mantis blades, I can kind of lunge forward and like I just lunge and they're dead, or like I just mash the mouse button and I've dismembered them completely. And so there's really not a lot of thought or elegance there, and it just hasn't felt quite as satisfying to do as the guns.
And it should be noted that, like, you can't just only do that because guys are going to be shooting at you around the corners, like,
right.
So you've got to switch it up.
I will say, like, when everything is working as it should, there is this kind of like sense of freneticness that is genuinely exciting. Like, when you do alert somebody and like so much shit is going down and like somebody's off in the corner trying to hack you, and you get the sense that you're overheating and you're like, fuck, the guys are also shooting at me, so I'm gonna like run and I'm gonna heal, and the heal is kind of instantaneous. Like, you just like slam on these health boosters, and so you're not like going into a menu to activate something, and I think that really keeps you in the moment, which is good.
Yeah.
And you're like going behind cover, and yeah, there's just this really strong sense of excitement when everything is working. And when you get into a given situation, I don't know how much of this you've seen, like, because I think it definitely expands over time. The game doesn't really push you in any one particular way. And you may not even be aware of what all your options are, but sometimes you'll get to a door or like a turret, and it's like, oh, I don't have the stats to like use this or open this thing or get access to this thing. And if you take the time to look around, there are definitely multiple ways to solve any one given problem, which is definitely nice and expected, I think, for sure. But I want to get into some criticisms because I do have a lot. We've been talking for like 27 minutes and it's been nothing but praise, but this game, and I don't know if your own experience can speak to this, but this game has been incredibly, incredibly buggy for me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's been strange because they've patched things, and there's a new driver that came out, and performance has definitely improved over time. And they made a note where they're like, definitely use the default graphic settings, because when you use other graphic settings, and I was running on like the high preset basically, with like a couple of things modified, they're like, if you mess with other graphic settings, things might get weird. And so maybe some of this could be attributed to that. But
yeah, so the one thing I have noticed on this, because I just got the 3080, so I'm like, I was going to like try to like, oh, I'll just stick to default, but I'm like, well, let me just turn things on and see how it goes.
Right.
But I put it up onto the basically the highest, the ray tracing ultra, and there were things that bugged me at first that I didn't know how to like pinpoint. But what I've kind of come down to is that I don't think that the DLSS implementation is ready. That's the AI learning NVIDIA tech.
Yeah.
That I don't know. It's some weird magic that NVIDIA has going on. But basically, it reduces the performance by figuring out what's supposed to be there based on all of these other images, background images, and AI learning things. But anyways, but where it's at right now, it does like, increase the performance and like things run in a solid 60 with DLSS turned on. But I really started to notice on like certain streets, like it just looked like this weird, like blurry soup, and I was like, what is going on right now? And I figured that might have something to do with it, and I turned DLSS off, and then sure enough, right away, like it looked crystal clear. And then I went through like the different settings, and then when I went to like the highest performance rating, then even like when I went to the menu and looked at V's character, he looked like he was rendered in like 360p.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I've definitely had small moments like this, but they've been relatively brief.
right. But that's one of those things where like it's not entirely done yet.
Right.
DLSS is its own weird thing that maybe is, not necessarily recommended in every case, and is also evolving over time on its own. And we also have the issue of there's just security protection on the pre-release copies that won't be there at launch.
Right.
And they said that's impacting performance as well.
Right. And so a lot of the problems that I've had with glitches and things, I'm a little bit hesitant because it's like I don't know how much this is going to be addressed in the coming days, but it has been significant enough that it has really taken me out of the game and honestly completely ruined entire moments. Like there was one, I don't want to get into the specifics of the mission to avoid spoilers, but something that I got excited about with this game is it's like, oh, I'm going to see how many different ways like I can approach the situation. And I just had one whole mission where guys just couldn't see me. And so, like, I was supposed to sneak around and get to this point, but it's like, oh, there's no threat here because something is wrong, and, like, these enemies, like, can't even detect me. So they're just, like, target dummies that have no reaction to what I'm doing, or enemies that'll be, like, in a T-pose, or, like, some dialogue conversations. Like, there was a really weird moment where it was a critical moment for the character. And again, I want to stay away from spoilers, but I picked a female V and some lines would be read as male V's voice. And it's like, there's nothing going on here that indicates that should happen, or like you'll be in a story moment, like having an important moment with a character, and you'll be getting like notifications for jobs. And I'm like, wait, didn't I already have this quest? Why is it redoing it? Just a bunch of weird interface stuff.
I've had some interface things to where like there'll be like interaction buttons like stuck on the screen, like when I'm not interacting with like a terminal anymore. Like it'll still like push B to exit, and I'm like, I'm walking around town right now. So that definitely goes beyond just like graphical settings.
Right.
But at the same time, like you said, we did get a patch that fixed some pretty egregious things that were there when we first started.
Right, and so I think that's why it's why we're doing an impressions video, and why it's probably going to take some time to really get out like a definitive opinion on this game, because based on the number of bugs that I've seen, I feel like Cyberpunk 2077 is this incredible game that just isn't quite ready yet. Like, it's definitely put me in the headspace sometimes of like, okay, I'm going to do this new quest. Like, I wonder what's going to go wrong this time. And it just depends. I feel like I have some sessions that are better than others. And it really can be very situational. But it is frustrating in a way that goes beyond just little minor things, where it's like, oh, like this is taking out any strategic decisions that I would make, or it's just ruining combat, or like I don't feel the emotion in this scene because like things are just breaking. And so that is definitely a word of warning that I want to give to people. And my hope is that when people actually get their hands on it, they're like, Ben, you're crazy. Like, I didn't have any of these problems. But it definitely feels like we're still very much in a things need to be patched situation, at least from my own experience. It doesn't sound like yours have been maybe as severe or as persistent, but...
Yeah, not yet. I haven't seen anything quite like that yet, but, I'm still, like you said, like, I'm still very, very early in. Mm-hmm. So...
I think the other thing of criticism that I want to say, and I definitely want to try the game out on hard, but I've been playing on normal, just the default difficulty. And something that I don't like is I feel like the game goes too far in the amount of resources that it gives you. So
Oh,
when I talk about like health recovery items, like I am not like stocking up on things or like exhaustively going around and checking every square inch. I feel like I'm playing pretty normally. Like I'm just, getting in a combat situation. If there's anything around that I see, I loot it, not really thinking too heavily about it. And I have like over 100 things that recover my health, or like I never, ever, ever run out of ammo. Um,
yeah.
and, this isn't a survival horror game, but I think it has gone too far in the surplus where it makes like interacting with the world like that need to go to vendors or to like really think about what you're bringing into combat. It's definitely removed a lot of that in a way that I think it could stand to benefit from, and maybe playing on hard will address those problems. I'll have to see, but that's just kind of where I'm at with it right now.
Yeah, kind of the counter to that a little bit. And I don't know if you feel like this is still true after all the time you put into it, but I feel like combat can be fairly punishing at times to where you can go down very fast. So in a sense, it's almost like the health items don't matter as much because you're not going to get a chance to use very many of them. Like
Sure.
it's like either you get one in there and then you're okay, or you've just made the mistake that's killed you. You're just going to
Right.
load that checkpoint.
Right. I think you're right. You can definitely go down very, very quickly. And there are times where you'll run into enemies and like if they have a skull above their head, like you could be down in one hit. And so the threat is there. I think once you kind of get a handle on how you approach combat, or you're like, I want to focus on this, a lot of that goes away. So like early on, I invested in handguns, right? And if you look at that skill tree, you can kind of stack damage and critical damage in such a way where it's like, I am downing dudes so fast that like they don't really have an opportunity to mess with me so much. And I've been investing in blades more as well, and I've kind of seen a similar effect where you
Got
can
it.
like stack these perks up, and you get enough of them that's pretty easy to do, that you become pretty powerful pretty quickly.
Are you using the kind of like booster items before you get into combat too? The like hydration and nourishment things?
No, early on, that stuff was a little bit more relevant to me, where I was like, I don't really want to use a health item. So maybe there'll be food around that'll recover my health and get it back. And so I definitely remember instances of that early on. But now, like like I said, I have so many health boosters that like I don't even look at that stuff anymore. Like I don't worry about food or any of that really at all.
And then what about your gear? Because this has been, one of the rare instances, because I tend to go with like, okay, well, if it's got higher stats, then whatever. But this has been one of those instances where like some of the higher stat things that I've come across, like I just don't like the way they look. So I'm just going to keep the things
Yeah,
that I like on my character.
Blood, that is a great point because okay, so this is a game, and this sounds so fucking cheesy when you say it, but this is a game that is so unbelievably cool that I cannot bring myself to like not look cool. Like V is just so awesome and surrounded by such badasses that I can't like I don't think I've ever equipped something on V's head because it all looks super lame. Like even though it would give me extra armor, or potentially,
I found some
mods.
good hats pretty early, but yeah.
Yeah, I found nothing that I've liked, so I just refuse to equip anything on V's head, and I have definitely gone style over stats in a lot of cases. But to your point about gear, there are layers to that as well, and you're not just necessarily looking at armor or damage, but mod slots as well, because some of the mods that you find that you can slot into both your weapons and your armor are very, very, very powerful. And so that becomes a pretty relevant decision as well. Blood.
We're so much farther than we want, like over the time that we wanted to
Yeah,
hit. But what else do you need to hit? What else do you want to talk about?
well, that's the thing is I feel like there's so many things that I haven't touched on that I could touch on, but
Right.
I think the major stuff I've gotten
Okay.
out of the way.
And fair point. We should mention you are working on the review.
Right.
We may or may probably won't have the review up before launch. That's one of the reasons we're doing this.
Yes.
The other being that we can't use our own footage today. We have to wait to use a couple of days before we can show you our own footage. But
Right.
But yeah, get some impressions out there while we can.
Yeah, I think to just reiterate everything, like the one sentence sort of summary of it all is, if I had to give you a review right now, the gist of that review would be like, this is an incredibly ambitious game that really feels like it is trying to push things forward in a meaningful way. And when it all is clicking, it is truly magical. Like, it really is. But it is on like shaky legs. Like, you definitely get the sense that the tech can't quite handle everything that it's trying to do. And you start to see the seams in a disappointing way. And my hope is that they can iron a lot of that out.
Yeah. Yeah, and we don't even know like what the console versions.
I have no idea. I'm
We're
really
running
curious.
this on like very high-end PCs. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if like the next gen versions would maybe be a little bit more consistent. I don't know. I would really like to get my hands on them.
Yeah, when it's not trying to use like DLSS and ray tracing as much and all that stuff. Yeah.
Right. But yeah, sorry this went over time, but I think for this game, man, and Blood, there's so much more I could say.
Well, they don't
close.
have to get our apologies.
Yeah.
It's just, other than they've been sitting here for a long time.
Yeah, well, I hope this was useful, especially since we're not going to be able to have a review out right away, to kind of get those initial conversations. Blood, you are at a point in the game, like, I don't say this condescendingly. I say this like in an excited tone. Like, you have seen nothing yet. Like, oh man. And I can't wait. There are just moments that I'm like, I can't wait for you to see this. I can't wait to see what decisions you make. Like, I'm really excited. So.
Cool. Thanks, Ben.
Yep.
And everyone, look forward to our review.
No. This isn't happening.
Oh, but it is.